Well,
what up, everybody? How you doing?
Well, hey, the revolution will be streamed
live, televised, whatever vise it is.
Skype live, yes.
Because we in, I feel like the end days,
right?
But we're gonna. I think this is why they made weed legal.
Oh my God, I have that thought every day.
See, I'm not crazy. My soulmate is here.
Welcome to another Critical and Thinking podcast. I'm Ian Harris.
Ty Barnett.
And we are joined today. Visually, you'll be able to see Kelly Carlin. Hello. And you'll be able to hear Rain Pryor on this other side over here. And yes, so this is really cool. We've been wanting to do this for a while.
A long time.
Because I think I asked you like almost a year ago, hey, you think you'd be down to doing that? And you're like, yeah, we'll have to work it out, and it took me a while.
It takes that long.
You can set that on there if you want.
Oh, I can't? Oh, look at this.
That.
I have people doing
technology
things for me.
Yes.
It's very lovely here. Excellent.
So a little, obviously, for those of you who are in the fucking Stone Age or
for
whatever.
People who don't, I don't know, who
Maybe
would not know.
But we're comedians, Ty and I. And
oh yeah, a lot of people might know that.
They might not know that.
A lot of people might not know that.
If they tune in, they think we're political pundits. They're like, "Wait, you guys do comedy? I thought all you did was Trump's playing everything or whatever."
Yes.
But we always thought it'd be really cool. To us, the two, I mean, I think to most comedians, the two greatest comedians to ever live.
Oh, thanks, bro.
Yeah, are Ian Harris and Ty.
No, sorry.
Nice.
Richard Pryor. George Carlin, and I met Kelly a while back, and she was so nice enough. And you did a really cool thing with a bunch of people. I had Penn Jillette, and I had Paul Provenza, and a bunch of people did little clips, and we met. And I was talking to Ty one day. I said, you know, it'd be really cool. Ty and I both have daughters. We're both dads of daughters, and I'm like, how cool would it be to have daughters of the comedians talking to comedians who have daughters? Because I'm like, how do I not fuck up my kid any more than I already have? Because you guys seem to be really cool, really. And I'm like, man.
So Rain was like,
yeah, she's like,
okay.
Sure, I'm well.
Yeah, no, you actually guys are probably being too good of parents, so you completely fucked your daughters.
We gotta mess them up. We gotta mess them up a little bit more. I gotta tell you, I personally am super excited for two reasons. I've known about Rain for a long time, and I've never gotten a chance to really meet you. So that was one. So I was very, very excited for this. And Kelly, let me tell you, I often wonder, like, I was like, man, you know what? It's amazing that these people can have these points of view, and we're different types of people. Mm-hmm. So that was my first introduction to it, like him, Brian Regan, these types of cats. So when I found out Ian set all of this up, I was just like, man, this is going to be one of the most exciting shows for me.
Cool.
Because I am still a fan of comedy. I am still a student of the art. And to see people who grew up in it, I want to get you guys' points of view on it, because my kids and Ian's kids, you know, we're not ultra famous. Well, you know, we can pay bills.
Yeah,
that's what we are. Like we make enough money to pay bills, and so far that's been cool. All right.
Right.
But we aren't ultra famous, so our kids haven't really had to live in that life. And I remember the closest I came to it one time. I just done Last Comic, and I was walking through the mall with my youngest, and she was like up to my hip, and some dude walked up like this close to my face and was like, "Hey," and even my daughter was like, I had to pull her back. And the guy was like, "Oh, I just saw you on the show." So that was my closest thing to it. So I want to ask both of you to have dads that are at that level still, by the way. Still, that's how you know, again, by the way, that you've made an imprint. Decades have gone by, and they are still considered the top of the top. What was the weirdest moment for you two being around your dads and at the height of everything? Either one can go first. I don't care who.
Go for it, Rain.
For me, it was the hookers. It was the hookers and the copious amounts of cocaine.
Okay.
That were just there.
We're gonna kill the slow music for this segment.
And then you're like, wow, that's fame.
Right.
Well, there you go.
I have a couple. We didn't have hookers. There was a lot of cocaine. There was a lot of cocaine, though.
Right.
two things. One of which was I was really little, and it was in the 60s, black and white TV. My dad was like, the straight-laced George Carlin version.
I remember.
And my mom's really excited because he's going to be on some big TV show, and I'm little. I'm 4, 5, somewhere around there. And she puts me up in front of the TV and it's like, Daddy's going to be on TV. Daddy's going to be on TV. Don't even know what the show was. And here's George Carlin. And my dad comes walking out, and all I see is this little man in the box, and I start screaming and crying for my daddy. Where's my daddy? Where's my daddy?
Oh, wait, so you thought something was wrong?
I thought he was locked in the box, Ty. Locked in the box. And then the weirdest thing as far as drugs goes is my dad did try to explain to my mother and I one morning that the sun had exploded and we only had 7.5 minutes to live.
Oh my God.
Yeah. But you can read about that in my book.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, no, I wonder about I did have a question about the drugs actually written down. How does that? I mean, I grew up with an alcoholic dad, and there was some drugs in our family because my parents would party. It was the 70s. Everybody did.
Everybody did.
But I didn't really. I knew about it later, and I saw some stuff going on, but I didn't see it. It's a known thing,
Yeah.
right? So it's like,
Right.
how was the? Were you guys were privy to it? How did that affect it? Did you know what was going on when you were like? What kind of age were you? And
I held up signs to my say no to drugs sign.
Oh my God.
I did. I used to leave condoms on his bed so like he wouldn't have any more kids.
Stop.
It's called parentification of the child, by the way.
Oh, well,
It's an actual
I'm glad
thing,
there's a
right?
Word for
There's
it.
an actual
I'm
word
glad
for
there's
it.
a word. So,
Are
yeah,
you
that
serious?
She is.
I'm serious.
Wow.
Very.
Yeah, I used to have to. My parents would hide their coke from each other because that's what cocaine makes
From
you
each
do.
other.
And
hilarious.
and then they would forget where they would hide it, and they would blame the other one for stealing it. And I would have to get in the middle of their arguments. And one night at 3 a.m., we went through a huge library of books because my dad had hidden it somewhere.
He did not
And
remember?
he could not remember. We opened up every single fucking book until we found their coke. And Dad was like, "Oh, I guess you didn't steal it."
This is already the best podcast we've done ever.
Which would be hilarious to me. Like, I'm thinking about my kid because my kid, like, she's 14 now, but every moment I have about her in my act, or every moment that's like really memorable was like 5 to 7.
Yeah.
That moment where she's kind of
Right.
discovering stuff and like swearing and whatever. Like I could picture. I don't do drugs at all or anything. But I could picture my daughter being like, "Dad, where did you hide the cocaine from Mom? Okay, Mom, calm down for a second. We'll
Yes,
find it." Like,
exactly. Exactly. Yeah.
To people who are just tuning in, we're tuning in. We're together with Rain Pryor and Kelly Carlin.
Hyphen, do you have a? Just I don't want to screw up your name. I mean, you're married, so do you go by?
I am. So it's Vane, but Rain. People know Rain Pryor. They know.
Okay.
If you're my friend, Rain Vane.
Okay.
Oh, wow,
Rain
Rain
Vane.
Vane.
Gently on the plane or
I
something.
love
Vane.
that.
I love it.
Exactly.
I have
Nice.
20,000 names also. My
Okay.
legal name is McCall because I'm married also, but my stage name, public name is Kelly Carlin because,
Yes.
Yes.
I mean,
Yeah.
I got to get some reward for
That's
this
right.
shit, people.
Right.
That's right.
Exactly.
Who knows? Pretty soon you'll be hiding cocaine in books.
I already went through that phase.
Oh,
It's
okay.
done.
Or to get political, you'll have Trump going,
Wait,
why does she
wait,
use her
this-
fake name? It's not even her name. She's using it for illegal reasons. She's trying to get some.
She's relying on her father for all of her
I
fame.
just love that Kelly said, like, I went through that phase. I went through it only once, tried it, went to my dad, said, I can't believe you would do this shit.
Mm.
And his response was, are you sure you're a Pryor?
Oh my God. That is phenomenal.
That's fabulous.
Okay, so you know what? That actually brings me to a question that I wrote down. I actually prepared a question. Yes, I did. So what?
That's homework right there.
Yes, it is actually. I usually just riff. But what is the biggest misconception about your dad's that the public had and but you know is not true?
Actually, can I give a real quick shout out? Zen, of one of my friends on Facebook, asked similar question. He said about myths that were different from what the public saw. So it's the same. So I just wanted to let.
Okay.
Great.
Yeah, same thing.
Well done, Zen. You're
Yes.
in alignment with Ty
Zen.
today.
Yes,
Exactly.
don't be taking my homework, bro.
Fantastic.
Well, for me,
Yeah.
I don't know. Let's see. I think a lot of people thought my dad, in some way, was like a Luddite or something. Like because he was like so like anti-capitalism or something like that. It's like he didn't like his shiny toys, which he really loved his BMW,
Right.
and his brand new Apple products every year.
Oh wow.
Yeah, right.
Nice.
I know, and he like he did Word on his Apple, and every year he'd get a new one. Like, Dad, you're not calculating, equations to go to the moon and back, But he loved having shiny new stuff, any kind of recording stuff or anything like that. He loved. And the other thing too is that people don't realize is that one of the ways that Richard and my dad were so different is that my dad never talked about his family on stage. So I think most people didn't even know my dad was married or had a kid because he never talked about his personal life on late night or stage or anything. Whereas Rain's dad would just unzip
Put it out
his
there.
soul and just put every personal thing out on stage.
That's true.
Exactly.
Yeah.
What was there anything, Rain, that you myths that you heard of, or things that you the
Oh, and I have
the
another
public
one after Rain.
collective thinks is true, that you're like, no, he was actually completely this other way, or
I don't know, because Dad was so honest about who he was,
Right.
that I don't know. Like, there wasn't any. I mean, he just kind of vomited the truth.
right?
Wow.
So there really is nothing other than the fact that he was very generous. I don't think people know that he gave things away. He gave things to school. Like, he didn't do it and then you found out about it. Like,
Yeah, my
people don't
dad was
know
like
he gave
that,
money to run a school,
Right.
and he gave all these kids on the island of Maui presents for Christmas and Hanukkah. Like, nobody knows those things. He was that type of person.
That's interesting. I found out after my dad died that he would like talk to like open mic comics. Like he would go into towns and like young college journalists would talk to him, and then they would say, "Oh, I'm doing open mics," and like 6 months later he'd call him up and say, "How's your set going? What are you working on?"
What?
I know. I found that out after he
Wow.
died.
Oh,
And
man.
that freaked me out. But the other big thing, the other big myth about my dad is because a lot of atheists worship my dad, which I give atheists a lot of shit about that. They worship him like a god, which is like, hello. Oh yeah, my dad was a spiritual seeker. He was very curious about the mystery of life and was always seeking and was fascinated by Buddhist and that I studied Jungian. Very open.
Feel this this like flawed character that is like you can look at someone and go, wow, that is a good person who has a good soul or a good psyche or whatever it is, but man, we are all so deeply flawed, and that's also what makes us makes those, I don't want to say us, those people who are brilliant sometimes.
Yes.
And it always drives me crazy now because we have this I mean, I don't believe necessarily in cancel culture, but we have this thing where it's so hard for people to separate the good things from people did from the bad things they did, and we talk about that all the time.
There's a lot of purity testing going on these days.
And what do you do when you have, you look at people, the Bill Cosbys of the world, or the anybody who did something. I mean, that's a little extreme.
Yes.
But point is that it's really hard sometimes to separate people from their work and their personal life if their personal life is in the collective, right?
I think it's an interesting point about comedians in general.
Because we idolize these, we idolize the Pryors and the Carlins and stuff, and we idolize the Cosbys too. But I always felt like, at least with Richard, it was like when I forgot what the documentary was. It was on Showtime, I believe, though. And when I watched it, I said, man, a lot of shit makes sense now. A lot of shit makes sense about him, how he wrote, why so many people gravitated towards it, and all that. And the same thing with your dad, when he came out there as a straight-laced dude, and then later he made this transformation into who he really was. And it's like, once you become that person that you really are supposed to be on stage, you see the truth come out. So when you would see Carlin,
Absolutely.
you see, so I loved watching both, because I remember the first time I saw an old Carlin performance, and I had to pause it and like, who?
Right.
Who is? Because it looked nothing like they do. And same thing with
Right.
Richard.
Well, yeah, old Richard Pryor.
Richard came out-
looked like he was 12 with the
Right.
whole
Yep.
suit.
But remember, he came up and he was trying to be like Bill Cosby, with being clean and all that. And even him and Cosby got into it when Richard was kind of like, man, fuck you, bro. I'm doing my own thing.
Right.
I'm paraphrasing, but but
No, that sounded great.
hilarious.
Right up there, yeah.
But that's what I loved about both of them, because their imprint, like when you look back at their history and their imprint on this society, no one goes to early Pryor, no one goes to early Carlin. They
Right.
always go to the evolved and the fully formed in their prime Pryor and Carlin, when they had the true voice that they really wanted to say and everything like that. So what I was wondering is, what did you two see around the house once that evolution was, when they said, yeah, this is what it is? Like, I'll tell you real quick what I mean by that is, like, I remember when I first started doing comedy, my mindset was one thing: I would just do the easy jokes, just do the jokes that I know are gonna get laughs and all that. And then when I found my voice, my attitude changed. My attitude changed
Right.
being with my kids. My attitude changed about life and all of that stuff. So what did you two see once they embraced the person that they became, that made them icons?
Great question, Ty. Well, for me, I was pretty young. It was 69, 70, so I was 6 or 7. The biggest change that happened was my dad grew a beard. He went and got a hernia operation and came home with like a beard, and it was like, who's this guy? When you're a kid, you're kind of like, well, Dad looks different. And things got very different because we started going on the road, my mom and I, with him, and I think the biggest thing, I mean, my dad was always the guy he was. He just put that suit on in order to have a career. He wanted to be Danny Kaye. Like, that was his thing. When he was a kid, he thought he was going to go to the movies. And then he and Richard came up together in a lot of ways. And then Richard was younger than my dad, but he made the change quicker. He made the change about 2 years before my dad. He walked away from Vegas first.
Yeah.
And my dad never
Right.
could really pull the plug in a direct way. Instead, he got fired for saying shit on stage. Like, he pushed.
that crazy?
My dad was like passive aggressive guy. He I'm going to push the limits and have someone else fire me, kind of a guy. Because he
Right.
was a street kid from New York.
Right.
He grew up, in Irish Harlem, between Black and Spanish Harlem. And he was he was an Irish street kid. So he had that kind of attitude. And, but Richard really was his leader. Like, he followed Richard's path. He saw Richard make the turn first, and he thought, okay, there's some safety there. And this is, of course, me as an adult being able to talk about this. But as a kid at home,
Right.
now my dad's hair was long and he was wearing hippie clothes
Right.
and he was saying the 7 dirty words on stage,
Right.
So yeah, it was different.
That's awesome.
Yeah. What about you,
Right.
Rain?
And for me, just growing up with Dad during the time of his transition, it was, the Black Panther Party at your house. It was revolutionary meetings going on in the living room, and
Whoa,
laughter about-
wait. So you mean literally the Black Panthers?
Yes.
Oh my God, I
Yes.
thought she was using that just an oh my God.
No, like I still have well, it's not mine. My dad gave it to me.
Come on, not on this.
Oh, we lost
To his side.
Whoa.
Huh? You lost me.
Yeah,
you. For a second.
for a second.
You're back.
You're back, though. It still says poor
Oh,
connection, but it's...
Okay, so it's like I have revolutionary suicide. I have, we had. That's where he went to. It's like you have to read Malcolm X. But Dad,
Right.
I'm 5. It doesn't-
You're like, who was your
Kids don't read
babysitter?
that.
Angela Davis and
You
Huey
will
Newton.
learn this by
What?
any means
No,
necessary.
actually, wait, hold up.
What, did
hold
you actually
up.
have Huey Newton as your babysitter?
No,
Okay.
I had Jim Brown
Right.
as my babysitter.
Stop.
I've had Holly Woodlawn
Oh,
as my babysitter.
Oh my
Wow.
God.
The iconic Holly Woodlawn.
Whoa.
And yes.
Whoa.
that's...
This
Yeah.
again.
see,
this is.
But see
awesome.
that's the kind of thing too where I think, like, is that, I feel like maybe when you look back at it, sure, but at the time, these are just,
It's just we're just at home with
you're
our
just
parents.
at home. It's people. Yeah,
Yeah,
right?
you
It's
don't
like,
know-
yeah.
There was nothing strange
Right.
or weird or
I mean-
about any of it. It's normal day to day.
Yeah,
Right,
I mean, Rain and
exactly.
I talk about this, and we both grew up in LA.
Yeah.
And even though we grew up a lot around people and went to school with other kids who had famous, it's just you just think it's normal.
Normal,
Like this
right.
is what it is, and you don't really kind of realize until you start going into other populations as a kid that like, oh, all right, mom and dad aren't. And other moms and dads aren't snorting coke and smoking weed at home.
Wait,
Maybe
no one else is doing coke at 5 in the morning? What? I don't understand.
I think that was kind of the weirdest thing about it, and it kind of made for a little bit of a lonely upbringing because you're kind of isolated, and you want to cover for your parents. You need to protect your parents. I mean,
Right.
I would have been taken away as a kid these days. My parents were
Yeah.
like so fucked up. And
Absolutely.
yeah,
right?
100%. So
Unless you're
Damn
in
it.
politics.
yeah, unless you're in politics.
Actually, it would have been the other way around. They're like, we're going to take your parents away.
Yeah, possibly. Yes. Well, they tried a few times. My dad
can
did
get
get arrested quite a few times. So,
Yeah. So
but
did my dad. Yep.
yeah.
Yeah.
So you go out and you pass as a straight person out in the world. I was a straight A student in school. I was, a very good girl in every other aspect
wow.
until I hit my teenage years and started doing my own drugs. But for the most part, I was there to uphold the Carlin reputation out in the world.
Right.
Yeah.
Now, did you guys know each other as kids?
No.
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 No. We met after my dad died. We met briefly at the awards when her dad was alive, but we didn't really meet each other. But we met through Paul Provenza and
Okay.
the Green Room.
You talking about
Oh,
the
yeah,
comedy
Green Room
awards
is
that they
great.
had over by Universal Studios?
I think so. It was, the American Comedy Awards.
Yes.
And
Yeah. Yes.
I'm going to tell you, my very first time coming to Los Angeles, let me think. Me and a friend of mine, Tony Daniels, we won a competition in Seattle, and the prize was a trip to Los Angeles to go to the Comedy Awards. And
Wow.
so we tied. No, we tied at the competition, and they couldn't decide who. And so me and Tony were on stage, and we said, "Hey, look, man, let's just us both go," because we both had we were both dating people, and so we were like, "Well, is your girl gonna trip?" I said, "I don't give a fuck." So let's go to this thing. Me and you both. They're not even in comedy. Me and you go. So
Right.
anyway, we came here, went to the American Comedy Awards, and let me tell you, I saw your dad across the room, and I forgot who I was. I remember somebody was fixing. Oh, Jamie Lee Curtis was fixing my boy's tie. She was fixing Tony's tie
Wow.
and trying to have a conversation. And I saw your dad across the room. I said, "I'll be right back, bro."
Excuse me, Jamie Lee.
I made a beeline for him, but this is like in the later stages. Unfortunately, he was like
He was in a
in
wheelchair.
the wheelchair and
Right,
stuff like that.
yeah.
Yeah.
And I remember seeing him, and I got to tell you, I very, very few people that I've met in my life, especially comedy, have I met where I said, you know what, this right here supersedes a ton of other shit.
Aw.
And I remember but I felt really bad though, because he was in the later stages, and then I remember when he passed, I actually had this sense of relief, because I
Right.
was like, man, he's no longer dealing with that, because that has to be
Right.
rough for him
Yeah.
to mentally be there, but not physically be able to do the things that he
What you
wanted,
did.
what you did, because I
Absolutely.
know, it must have messed with him. So it was one of those bittersweet moments. But I'm telling you,
Yeah.
I always tell people, I'm like, listen, you guys don't even understand. That right there is still, I've been doing comedy, 20 years. That's one of the tippy top moments ever.
That'd be
It's
happy.
Ever.
It's funny. I met I met both your dads. But same thing. Late stages. There was some tribute or something at the Laugh Factory. This is same thing. There's somewhere around there, or some club in LA, and and I didn't know what it was about, but he was there for some reason. Same thing, wheelchair, and I was like, "That's Richard Pryor. Is he gonna be in the room?" And I went and asked again if it was. I can't remember if it was the Improv or the Laugh Factory, because I do impressions that I used to do. I do a George Carlin impression. I do a
Right.
Richard Pryor impression. I used to do all these impressions, and I'm like, I'm gonna see if I can go do a Richard Pryor impression in front of Richard Pryor. That'd be so cool. None of it happened, but at least I was like, "Hey,
That's
sir,
awesome, though.
how are?" Well, the funny thing is that actually, similar. I was at the Comedy and Magic Club several years ago. This has got to be at least 10 years ago. And I was there to do their little 4 minutes on July. Every July they give you 4.5 minutes, and it's like 30 comics on
I've
stage,
seen
right?
that, yeah.
And George was there, right?
No, he wasn't there, but Sally was there.
Yeah, he was dead 10 years ago.
Well, no, it was actually right before. It was before that though, so it might have been 12 years ago.
2007.
So, yeah, it was probably
early
right around there.
2008.
Yes. So I was just gonna do comedy, and then Mike Lacey goes, "Hey, and Carlin's I don't know if they were like fiance. I don't know what it was at the time. Is it
Girlfriend.
Girlfriend.
They never
yes.
married.
Oh yeah. And he goes, girlfriend or whatever is here, and would you do your George Carlin impression tonight? And I'm like, well, Mike, I wasn't really planning on doing impressions. He goes, come on, just for me, it would be really great if,
Mike.
if you did your George Carlin impression.
Right.
So I said, all right. So I did my thing, and I get off stage, and he comes up and he goes, oh, I got. And Howie Man on the corner and knocks me on my ass. Or he said, but. I go, how? What are you doing? And he's like, he goes, why didn't you tell me George was going to be here tonight? And he goes, it's not. It's just some kid doing an impression and whatever. And then he went out there. He's like, okay. I'm like, that's kind of cool. I made Howie Mandel knock Mike Lacey over in the.
And that's a good Mike Lacey, by the way.
Yeah, I know.
I know. Did there. That's pretty good, man.
I don't want to go too
For
far.
you comedy geeks out there, you know what we're talking about.
So since you both know the impression and that your dad's left, did you ever feel like, was there any pressure to either go into the field or to kind of go? I know, Rain, I know. What was your mindset? Was it like, because I remember like Michael Jordan's son played basketball for like a hot second. And I always wondered if he stopped because of, you can't, it's Michael Jordan. You're always going to be compared to that person. Did you ever feel, did either of you ever feel like I'm going to either go into it and do this, or I'm going to get as far away from that as possible to establish my own thing?
For me, it was both. For me, it was, I'm going to do this because he had said to me, you should do stand-up comedy.
Wow.
And I'm like thinking, okay. But people could not separate him and I, regardless of the fact that I had a vagina. Like, it just was not, it was just, there's that expectation. And so like, as a comic, as you both know, you get to go out and go to the rooms and work stuff out, and it's either funny or not, but you it out. And I felt at that time I didn't have that honor to be able to work stuff out first.
Yeah. I didn't even think about that. I didn't even think about that. I didn't think that would automatically, because you already given this status. You're given this status before you even get a chance to grow.
Yes.
So I didn't even think about that.
You can't be invisible or anonymous in any way, which you really need at that early stage. I had the opposite. I started doing storytelling. After my mom died in '97, I started to write a one-person show and started to develop that. And my dad was very uncomfortable with it, and basically said to me, look, I love you, and I'm never going to tell you you can't do this, but I'm not coming. I can't support you. What? Because he had a lot of guilt and shame around the drug years, and part of my story is surviving my parents' drug years. It's my story. There's no blame. I'm not victiming, no perpetrator, nothing like that. I'm just like, hey, this is what I fucking survived, and it was chaos. My dad had his own issues around it. But then at one point too, I went to grad school and came back and all of that, and did my best to stay away from it. But Spalding Gray was my big hero. I wanted to be a Spalding Gray. I wanted to be able to unzip my soul on a stage and make people laugh and cry through my life stories. And so I started working on some small stories, and my dad said to me, you don't want to be a stand-up, do you? And I knew that it was the same thing that Rain was saying. Is like, he knew that no matter what, I would be a Carlin, and he wanted to protect me from the horrific hecklers out there who would say something like, bring the funny Carlin out or something like that. He just wanted to be a protective dad. And I have to say something else, which is that when you're with someone who's like Richard or my dad, I don't know so much if Richard was like this, but my dad was a bit like this. There was there was healthy and some unhealthy narcissism around it all because
Yes.
there was really only room for one Carlin on a stage in a lifetime. And so when my dad died, I felt like I finally had permission to get on a stage
And tell your story.
and tell my story and do whatever I wanted on a stage without him kind of standing in the background wringing his hands about it all, you know. And it was funny because my uncle, his brother, and my cousin, who's my uncle's son, they both started doing stand-up also after my dad died. And they're both very funny. And actually, my Uncle Pat fed my dad a lot of ideas and a lot of things.
Wow. Huh.
And so all three of us became performers after my dad died. That's how much space a genius like that takes up in the world, in a family's psyche, for sure.
Right.
Well, you know, it's funny. I had stopped doing comedy. So I had my daughter in 2005. And I started comedy in 92, and, I've been doing it pretty much my entire adult life, and I stopped doing it pretty much, I'm not to be on the road. I'm like, I'm not going to go on the road. And I ended up, wasn't going up in LA, wasn't doing anything. And I took like 5 years off. And I was working on some films and stuff like that. And actually, I think I told you the story. My friend and producer lived next door to your dad.
Mm-hmm.
So I had met him a few times, and hey, can I park in your driveway, sir? There's no place to park here. All right.
The canals.
Yeah, in the canal. And I actually asked him to do a cameo in the film, and he actually read it, and it was like,
no.
no, actually, you know what the funny thing is? He actually left a message. This is oddly enough, I always joke around that I have horrible bad luck, and he left a message with Zelda, and he goes, yeah, he's like, I want to make sure. He goes, I got to talk to him because I want to make sure that there's a lot of comedians in it. He goes, it's not about stand-up, but there's comedians. It's an LA story. He goes, I want to make sure the comedians are portrayed right, which was my big thing. I'm like, oh, yeah, no, sure. I was like, oh,
Awesome.
cool. Can I talk to him? And she's like, yeah. And that was 2 days before he died.
Wow.
And my friend called me the next day and said, so apparently you killed George Carlin. She
Oh,
goes,
my God.
She goes, as soon as he said he would do your project.
He's like, I'm out of here. What the fuck was I thinking?
But oddly enough, I felt so much. I mean, I don't blame myself. But it's ridiculous. But I felt this weight of like, whoa, George Carlin. It was like I was gonna talk to him, meet him, and then my friend called me and he said, was talking about what a loss it was to comedy, and my friend goes, I think it's really dumb that you don't do comedy anymore. And that was what got me back to doing stand-up comedy again. Yeah. And then I started, it took me about a year or two to really do it. But then about 2 years later, I got back on stage. And I got back on stage and I took my daughter when she was like 5 or 6 on my birthday to a coffee shop in Culver City. And she'd never seen me do comedy. Didn't even know I was a comedian.
Wow.
And I did an open mic, like 5 minutes at some open mic where everyone was horrible. And I was, so I just crushed it at this like coffee shop open mic.
Wow.
And my daughter was like, what the fuck was that?
Yeah.
And I was like, all right, I'm going to start doing this again. And that's what got me back into doing comedy full time.
That's great.
Isn't that true? Yes.
Yeah, I've never even walked away from it. I love this, but so I'll tell you, it's so funny. I almost forgot to even bring this up. So in my home, and my wife, she hates this. I have 1, 2, 3 pictures of your dad in the house. One is an album that I got, and it's off to the side so no one can see it. But there's another one that I made. Like, I made this poster myself back in the day, and the poster is 3 pictures of Richard. And so they kind of, was a small picture here, it gets here, and then a big picture of him, and then it says no Facebook following, no MySpace page, no YouTube following, simply funny. That's all it is. It's just simply funny, and it's in the bedroom, right? So my wife jokes about this. She hates it. She's like, "Why do you have to have the face there?" I said, "It's not right in front of the bed. It's off to the side, first of all." And then I got another one that's the poster from, I forgot which album it is, but it's in the living room. So every time we talk about, moving stuff around, I always I said, listen, everything else, aside from that New York picture, is the pictures of Pryor that's off. We can't even do that. They're not moving. They're not going anywhere. Nothing. They're not. And I try to explain to her why. I said, because I get inspiration from it. I get inspiration from great people like your dad and your dad. Because to me, it really wasn't about being. It wasn't about that. It was about simply getting on stage, pouring your heart out, and getting the reaction. That's just what it is. So to me, I get inspiration from people like that. So I keep these up in the house because I want to be able to walk into. You never know where you're gonna write. I may write in the living room. I may write in the bedroom. You know what I'm saying? I may write in the little studio area. But I always wanted to have something to draw something from. So my question is, what do you two draw inspiration from, and what did your dads draw inspiration from?
Good question. Go ahead,
Go
Rain.
ahead.
No, go ahead.
Well, I was gonna say I draw inspiration. I think the same way. Life, observation. Dad drew inspiration from the same things, and we're both like, the thing I think that's similar is for me with Dad is like, we don't know how not to speak our truth. That's why, like, let's say I got into like, I'm gonna run, for city council in Baltimore, because I want to bring about change through truth.
I want to talk about that too, by the way.
And that's the wah wah wah.
Wait, truth in politics?
Yes.
What?
Yeah, exactly.
You are not part of this club.
I can tell you right now, just because I want to hear your answer too. Anyone listening now that, because normally by this point me and Ian are going off on how fucked up the government is, so I know they'll turn in like, what? Why aren't they? What's going on? And don't worry, we'll get to that in a second. Everybody, we will get to that in a second. And your inspiration, what do you draw inspiration from?
It's funny because these last 10 years since I've been doing a lot more writing and pondering and putting my own, I had a podcast myself called Waking from the American Dream, and that really gave me a place to find my own voice and interview people, and Rain was on it a lot, and I had all different kinds of comedians and creatives and politicians and spiritual people and just all over the board. And my dad used to talk about the things that inspired him were three different things, one of which was language, obviously. If you're a George Carlin fan, you know that he loved language. And that was
matter.
Words matter. And that at the same time, they are just words. Like, it's a construction and it's not at the same time. Like, really interesting. But language was very important to him. He was fascinated by language. He was fascinated by the truly the huge big picture. He used to talk about like having a perspective off of Earth so he could really be critical and have a critical eye towards everything and not be at all kind of worried about the outcome. It gave him a chance to kind of not be worried about the outcome. And then, of course, observational humor, which is something really my dad was the pioneer in, that let's talk about these crazy little things we do, like, snap, crackle, pop and snap, crackle, fuck you. And, all the little observational stuff that he did, a lot of at the beginning, tons and tons and tons of it. And I think about my own mind and what I'm fascinated with. And he made me fascinated with language from day one. I still love the etymology of words. I love the power of words. I love how
you love to use big words.
I love to use big words.
I know. I'm like at the Google etymology.
I don't know anything about insects.
Words.
And exactly. But I love big picture stuff too. I mean, I love being like really taking a big look back. I think that's why I'm a practicing Buddhist. It's why I love the Zen stance. It's like a big, like that's the most, and all that cool stuff. But I'm also a Jungian, psychologist. I have a women's coaching business, and I work like on detailed levels of like the macro, micro of a life, and what are the shit we think about all day, and what shapes us. I'm fascinated by what shapes us. And so I don't know if that's like genetic or nature versus nurture or what. But for me, like my dad, like Lenny Bruce was huge for my dad. Lord Buckley was huge for my dad. People like that. But what people inspire me are people like Georgia O'Keeffe and Frida Kahlo, like are female artists who basically said, I'm going to go do whatever the fuck I want. And I don't give a shit about whether this is popular or interesting to anyone else. Right. This is the shit living in my head and I need to put it out somewhere. And I feel like I'm just starting to get to that point in my life.
Really?
Like, yeah, at 55, 56 now, I'm like, I'm just starting to feel like I can be more like that person.
And don't you think, to me, when you think about that, what you just said, and it goes along with comedy or music or anything, it's almost always, what Ty was talking about, finding his voice later on.
Yep.
It's always when one says, I'm just going to do what the fuck I like to do.
Yes.
And this is what I'm about. That's when people go, sometimes it never till years after they're dead. Sometimes that's the little spark that all of a sudden everyone goes, whoa, what is this person talking about?
Yeah.
But it's amazing. It's like, it's so many times you hear people go, I did this for all these years. And then when I said screw it and just went and did my own thing,
Boom.
all of a sudden everyone wanted to hear what I had to say.
It is fascinating.
And that's what, to me,
Right.
like, that's what great art is, really.
I agree, and I think that's what the role of the artist actually is
Now-
is to speak that unique truth.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
And I think and that's the difference. I mean, the thing is, I think that all art is really the same in that. Whether it's music or painting or writing or
Agreed.
comedy, art is art. It's inspired by something. It has it has a message, not necessarily that it has to convey a message, but it always has a message of who you are as an individual.
Yes, and it's always
Right.
rubbing up against the status quo in some ways.
Right.
It's standing separate from it and saying, this is how I see it.
Right.
Whether you see it that way or not, that's a separate conversation.
Yes.
Yeah.
Now, really quick, so, I want to get your perspectives, and then you can do the same thing. If you want to tell me what you think your dad's perspectives were or would have been, that would have been great. But I want to get your perspectives. Right now, there's a big thing with everyone's talking cancel culture, and everyone's talking about punching up and punching down, and the Dave Chappelle thing because it's such a weird. And of course, Trump, all this, the non-P, everything is. Oh, we don't want to be PC, but it's like now PC is not being PC means you get to be racist or whatever. It's like this weird time that we're in where it's like on one hand we want everyone doesn't want to be PC, but on the other hand everyone thinks that they're getting canceled for saying stuff. But I don't know. I kind of feel like it's all a little bit nonsense. I don't think people are actually being canceled. But I also think people are not need to be aware of what they say in today's society on some level. And I'm just wondering what you guys' thoughts are as far as, I don't know if you saw it, like specifically Chappelle's was the one that started everybody talking about it in the last couple months at least. And I don't know, what do you guys think about maybe that specific or in general, pushing the boundaries and punching up, punching down, that sort of thing? Like, where do you think it goes now? Is it over the top? Have we gone too far with it, or have we not gone far enough with it?
Well,
Look at Cal.
I think a lot about this because I get asked this a lot
Really?
because of my dad, and so there's
Right.
a role that political correctness came from academia, and it's from a very specific place on the planet, and it was about postmodern thinking and multiple perspectives and things like that. And so the important part of multiple perspectives is that everyone gets to say their own fucking reality. Everyone gets to say, I feel like this when you do that. So everyone gets to say that. What happens though is when we say, you no longer get to say that because it's potentially going to hurt me. And it's like, all right, so there's always a dance between being a decent human being
Yes.
and not fucking with other people and being horrid.
Exactly.
And also being someone who's going to cross the line. My dad said that the role of the comic is to find the line and cross it, and then make it as logical and funny enough that you bring the people with you.
Right.
Yes.
Right.
That's the part people don't say very
Exactly.
often.
And sometimes you
because
cross it.
everyone's too sensitive.
Right.
Right. And so the thing is about like Chappelle's thing. I watched Chappelle's thing. Nothing offended me in it at all. Here's the thing I think about stuff like that is if you're going to cross the line, this is why I loved my dad. He was so fucking artful at constructing an argument that you were suddenly over the line with him and you realized, how the hell did we get here?
Right.
I am now
Right.
thinking things I've never allowed myself to think before and laugh at things and realize that it's all constructed. My dad was the person who protected what he felt was maligned minority in America. I mean, I
Right.
grew up in a household like Rain where we, the N-word was not allowed ever. My dad used it on stage a few times to make a point about language. But I mean, he was very, very sensitive about how white male fucked
Right.
over everyone
Yes.
of any other color, and that
Right.
capitalism and patriarchy and all that kind of stuff. And at the same time, you can't I think my dad would be canceled these days. Like there would be people
Right.
up in arms about
Absolutely.
something my
Yes.
dad or Richard would say. 100%. So
Absolutely.
Oh yeah.
I want to. Okay, so I'm gonna let you answer the same question, Rain. But then I want to say something specifically about what you just brought up
'Kay.
and your dad. So
Oh, I was gonna say pretty much ditto. I mean, that's that's what I think about it. I think we're in I think right now we're in this, there's a difference between I'm telling you this, it's sincere and it's truthful, and it might be on that edge of, is this okay? And then being divisive
Right.
to start something.
yeah.
Just
know
to
what
be
I mean? And I
divisive.
feel like-
Yeah.
Yeah, just to be divisive. And I think that's kind of like, if you look at the world, that's kind of where we're sitting right now,
okay.
Yeah.
across the board.
Yeah, exactly.
You know, it's that there is no line, because the line just keeps getting pushed and pushed and
Mhm.
pushed and pushed,
And
Mhm.
and
people are getting more and more offended.
and the reality is more speech is always better, because the more
Right.
speech we have, the more we can talk about what's wrong with these ideas. It's about
Right.
ideas, people.
Yeah.
And that's the thing. And here's the other thing too. The culture in 1960 and the culture in 2019 are two different cultures.
Yes.
We are moving into a more inclusive thing.
Right.
There are
Right.
people who want to be called they and we and all. That's, that's fine. Wonderful. Yay, people are declaring who they are. The culture is changing. It's the same thing with the Me Too movement. And when the
Yes.
culture changes, they do it it's a really clunky, horrific, unsophisticated way of changing. And it feels like a
It's like birth.
sledgehammer. Yes, and it feels like a sledgehammer everywhere. The culture will figure their way through this. But right now, and I think social media has added to this, is
Oh, yeah.
everyone has a fucking point of view.
And everyone's emboldened.
And it's emboldened, and you're anonymous. And whenever someone
Right.
fucking trolls me, all I say to them on Twitter is, if you were standing in front of me, would you say that to me? And they disappear.
And they go
Well,
away.
we talk about that all
time.
the
I'm
level
gonna
of
try that.
The
vitriol.
keyboard warriors.
The level of vitriol goes away the closer you are. On an open forum, people are crazy. You private message them, they're a little less crazy. You call them on the phone,
Right.
they're a little
Exactly.
less face to face. They're your
Little
best friend.
Yeah.
So-
it's great.
So yeah, Ty, what was your point?
I want to say that I agree with everything both you said. But what I specifically want to ask about was when Richard came back from Africa. Was it Africa he came back from?
Yeah, came back from
And
Africa.
he said, I'm no longer going to use the N word.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
That to me was one of those moments where he said he was very aware of his words and how his words carried over to other people and all, and that was also at a time where white folks was just using it more hatefully and everything like that. And you know,
Right.
same thing with George, he used it to make a point. So I agree that we are hypersensitive, but what I admired most about your dads were it wasn't malicious. When they said
No.
these things on stage,
Never.
If Richard talked about gay people, he always put himself in the type of situation to where you're like, oh, okay, well, wait a minute.
Right.
It's a personal experience. George is
Right.
talking from a personal experience, so you can't get mad because it's not a generalization that they're making about
Right.
other people.
Yeah.
When
Right.
he talked about
Right.
racism, he wasn't making it about all you people do this. He's saying this is my experience with this. And
Right.
so when he
Right.
changed his tone about using the N word, he had that awakening, but he still was true to his ability to still, like you said,
Yes.
bring people with them. Same
Right.
thing with George, bring
Right.
people with them. And by the time you saw their point, like you said, you were already there with them. This is
Right.
I would say the same thing like with Mudbone. When he did Mudbone, like this, I always tell people when I see them perform, I'm like, are you just telling the story, or are you really trying to place people exactly there with you?
Right.
And that's what these two legends did. They made you see exactly what you felt like you were sitting there
Right.
with
You
Mudbone.
did.
Yes.
You know what I'm
You
saying?
did.
You felt like when Carlin's talking about the 7 deadly words, like you're like, shit.
Yeah,
Like,
because-
you're
Right.
there.
Yeah.
So I like that they were wordsmiths first, and the fact that they were able to do that. This is why I have a problem with these new guys, because they don't value that. They don't value being
Right.
able to say the same thing, but say it in a way where you bring everybody in.
Yeah.
They figure, oh, let me just say something offensive.
Yeah.
And if you don't like it, then you're not letting me be edgy.
Like, and then I wonder, is that because we have social media? You know, it's like we've lost the ability to communicate effectively with one another.
Yeah.
You know, because you swipe, you delete, you know what I mean? Throw out a couple of words. It's become this weird way of ineffective communication.
Yeah, I mean, Twitter taught me how to write a joke because in 140 characters you have to figure out the exact rhythm and word placement in order, and that's the art of joke writing.
Right.
That's what you need to know, no matter what, even if it's in your bones and you don't. My dad worked so hard on crafting a piece. People didn't know. People thought, oh, he just got up there and talked. Yeah, right. My dad was the kind of artist who took ideas and then formed them into a thing and then went and worked it out for a year on stage to get the exact thing. And then he memorized it word for word. So when he would tape an HBO show, when he taped an HBO show, there would be a 15-second difference between Friday night and Saturday night's show because it was the exact same thing.
That's
and so
right
he constructed logical arguments. He used reason and his rational mind to bring people along. So they had to come along in some way. And that's what I see so much of is lazy writing, lazy thinking.
Wow.
And that's why my dad to this day is, you can watch
Still revered.
anything from the
It's
last
still
35
good.
years
Yeah.
and it's still pertinent to today.
So,
real quick, I was just going to say the thing that, for me, I think that most people, the one thing that always throws me off, because I'm like a nerd, I'll sit around and like evaluate everything, you know, break every joke down.
you should see this dude prepare for a show.
But I'm that way. I will figure. Seriously, and I'll figure out exactly which. No, that word doesn't have the right rhythm to it. I need to find a word that.
Yes.
But I always thought. I think a lot of people think that about George. They go, "Oh, he's a wordsmith," and this, and I never hear that. Not never, but rarely do I hear Richard get those kind. And to me, I always say he had a poetry to his words that was so meticulous. There was like, it was very real, and like the way you would just talk to people. Right. But when I talk to anybody about comedy, I always use two examples about great joke writing that are so simple that it's all about the words and how perfect it is, and they're both Richard Pryor. One is how he talks about the bit where we civilians can save people now. He goes, by giving a mouth-to-mouth resuscitation. He goes, I don't know. If I'm walking down the street and there's a dude with slobber and shit hanging out his mouth, he ain't gonna make it. And to me, that little jump of he ain't gonna make it, and then he acts it out. He always then would act out. And he'd come up, hey, bro, you ain't gonna make it. Unless you can get someone to wipe that shit. But I always, since I was a little kid, I'm like, what a clever way of saying I'm not going to. He didn't have to say all that. He just said, he ain't gonna make it.
Yeah.
And
makes you make the leap.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And then the other one was as being I make my living mostly doing comedy for atheists and stuff like that. So I always get compared, like you said, atheists love George Carlin, and that's amazing. And I'm like, yes, he was so great, especially later on when he did all the stuff about stuff that's bullshit and all that kind of stuff. But the joke that I always point to that I think is one of the most irreverent jokes of all time, because of the situation, was there's a joke Richard Pryor did, and it almost seemed like an aside, the one about vampires or Dracula. And he goes, they say if Dracula come to you, or vampires come to you, you got to show them a cross. He goes, because apparently vampires are allergic to bullshit. And I'm like, for him to have said that.
It's everything packed in it.
Back then, though, with his audience, like, your dad's audience,
Right.
okay, his audience, like, to me, that's like, I can't believe that he got, nobody went, ooh.
Yeah.
He brought everybody along with him.
Yeah.
And that's what I think, that's an amazing thing to me.
I would ask this, because I didn't even realize this until later when I watched, what was that? What was the special Pryor did where he didn't like it and he went back? He said, I didn't like
Sunset Strip.
Sunset Strip?
Sunset
Was it
Strip.
it?
Yeah.
Okay, so
yeah.
I had to go back and watch it. I was like, oh, that's right. He did do one night, and then he wasn't liking it. Packed house, and he says, you know what? I'm just not feeling this. I'm going to come back. First of all, balls.
Right.
Huge. I mean, because it's hard to do that in a small room. You ever been in a small room?
But see, you can do that before. To me, you could do that before social media.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
It was a different time, and comics were different. Like comics hung out with each other.
Yeah.
Right.
Back then, do you know what I mean? It was a different kind of. Go ahead.
No. I was going to ask you, like you said, it was a different time. So did you, when that happened, did you hear about that at home? Was there anything that he brought personally from that?
Absolutely. He would obsess over the fact that he felt he screwed up.
Wow. Because he came back the next night and murdered. And that's why I say you don't find people that are, first of all, that have that kind of, that people that give them that. Like the audience gave him that. They said, man, you Richard Pryor, bro. Take your time, man. Take your time. Come back when you're ready. So
Yeah, it's interesting.
to with George now, because I always wonder, like, joke books. Like, Ian and I have joke books. I don't know how many joke books Ian has. But now with George, because he has a bunch of specials, did he ever have a time where he said, you know what, I'm not feeling this right now, I'm going to come back and do this? Or was he said, nope, I'm just going to power through this?
He worked always, well, if it was an HBO special, you know, he had that unique relationship with HBO where he was one of the first. Robert Klein was the first. My dad was the second, but my dad did 13 with them. And he worked every 18 to 24 months towards that HBO special. So he knew when he was taping an HBO special, he already had a third of the next special written. Like he knew what he was already going to be doing. Yeah, he was prolific.
Man,
I
I
have
feel
so much
lazy
stuff.
today.
I have so much stuff in my computer of his stuff that was probably 3 new HBO specials that were just in the early stages. He was so prolific, and so he worked towards that. He needed those kind of handrails and those kind of goals. He was very self-disciplined. He as Jon Stewart once said, you know, George would he'd walk in, punch the clock and sit down for 5 hours and then punch the clock and walk out. I mean, he was that kind of a writer, that kind of disciplined. So but back in the drug days, there were a lot of times when he didn't show up.
Really?
And when he was the straight guy and he started doing more subversive material, he was trying to get fired at the Playboy Club in Lake Geneva. He laid under a piano for the entire show and read the phone book trying to get fired.
Stop.
And somebody went, genius, brilliance, and then they gave him a raise.
They booed and they
You
were all,
obviously don't know what he's doing.
Yeah, no,
now.
he was, and he had smoked a lot of weed or something, whatever it was. But so it depended. But when he was younger, he would feel more that way. But when it came to like HBO or something like that, he had a different, he was there was part of him that was a good boy in interestingly strange ways.
I have to ask this question really quick, and then
I have to go.
We have to go, yeah. So we're in an hour. But yeah, ask your question, but then I want to ask let him,
real quick, Rain. Could you see Cleavon Blazing Saddles? Blazing Saddles. I know your dad wrote it. Could you see Richard Pryor doing it, or are you comfortable with Cleavon Little?
I love that.
I'm definitely comfortable with Cleavon Little.
Okay.
Excuse me while I whip this out.
Was it again?
Sorry.
And I can hear my dad.
Okay.
Yes,
Okay.
of course.
You know
exactly.
what, though? I think back because, I didn't know about that till obviously much later.
Mm-hmm.
But it would have been obviously 2 completely different films. But the thing about it, it's like it's you can tell it's Richard's writing. But Cleavon Little he just had that, like, I don't know, he was just so smooth and
Yeah.
It was just like, you go, man, that guy, I can't picture anybody not other than him doing it. He's so smooth.
Yeah. Totally.
So let's we're running out of time, and Kelly's got to go. But I want to know, tell us a little bit about running for city council, and then tell us a little bit, Kelly, about what you're up to.
So I decided to jump in and be that person in the community that actually steps up and says, hey, I'm going to do something good for the community.
Love
and run
it.
for city council in Baltimore. And it's, it's an interesting process. I realize, and I'm honest about it, I don't like the politicians of politics.
Yes.
Yeah.
And I would love to see more citizens get involved that really care about community than people who want to, and this is on both sides, that want to line their pockets and are, taking advantage of people who need the support and help. So
I love that. I love that, and I don't live there, but you got my full support. I can tell you that for
Thank
sure.
you.
You can send, and everyone, you can send her money. She's raising money for her campaign.
Yes.
So please
Done.
Right.
just look up her
Yeah, Pryor, the number 4 citycouncil.com.
And when is the actual election for city council for the voting or whatever?
April 28th.
Okay.
Next year.
Okay.
Yeah, so this is all campaigning fundraising time.
Nice.
That's what I'm in right now. Campaign fundraising time.
All
Oh,
right,
that's
everybody
gonna be
watching, please support.
Is it a
support.
specific zone of?
Third district.
Third district.
Okay,
Yeah,
cool.
3rd district in Baltimore City.
Awesome. All right,
Awesome.
great. And what have you been up to?
And I've walked back into the teaching world. I'm coaching women right now. I have a business called Women on the Verge, Go Deep to Take the Leap, and I take about 18 women each year at different times of the year, 6 different times of the year, and I help women step into, mostly women who are in transition, figuring out what's next in the next chapter of their life, but really it's about helping them dismantle the narrative inside of their head about cultural baggage and family baggage about who they are and what they're really worth.
She's amazing.
Thank you. And so I've been doing that now for about a year and continuing that on, but and now that the business is settled in and in a flow, I'm starting to get itchy now about writing and performing again. So there's going to be probably in 2020 for sure, I'll be getting back on a stage and telling some stories again.
I love it.
Yeah.
I love it. We know you got to go. I just want to say this. This has been an honor. This has been
so much fun.
honor is an understatement. So thank you both. Everyone out there watching, listening, all of that stuff. You just wouldn't. Can you see? I don't know if you can see.
You can't see Rain.
But
She's waving.
I'm waving. I'm waving to my friend.
Right.
and the lasting impressions that your dads left was awesome. But I wanted to say you two are individually amazing human beings in
thank
your own
you.
right.
Thank you.
And keep going forward. Good luck
Thank you.
with your
Yes, make a change.
Thanks,
That's
guys.
yes.
Good luck to you both, and thank you both for blessing our podcast. And give them all information about the show.
Yes, you can find us on iTunes and Stitcher. And those of you who are watching on Facebook, still download the episodes. iTunes, Stitcher, Google Play. If you want to support us, criticallandthinking.com. Or no, patreon.com/criticallandthinking. And that is pretty much it. You can find Ty at
ComedianTyBarnett.com, which has all the links to all the social platforms and all of that.
And you can
Ian
find
Harris,
me
comedian.
at kellycarlin.com, of course.
KellyCarlin.com. And she's active on the Twitters.
I'm big active. So I'm
Big active.
Kelly_Carlin.
140 characters or less.
Right?
280 these days.
Yes,
lazy,
exactly.
lazy writing.
Ooh.
Lazy writing.
Lazy writers. We'll see y'all next time. Peace.
Peace.
Peace.